In settings where sociability and constant group interaction are treated as the norm, a person's choice to spend time alone is often misread or judged rather than understood. Individuals who choose to spend time alone are often described as shy, antisocial, or lonely. Psychological research suggests a different explanation. In practice, people who choose solitude are often not avoiding social life. They may be using time alone to reflect and to stay attentive to their own thoughts and values. In psychological research, loneliness is usually defined as the painful feeling that one's social relationships are not meeting their needs, while solitude refers to being alone, often by choice, and it can be neutral or even beneficial depending on the context. Loneliness is the distress that comes from feeling cut off from other people, whereas solitude refers to time spent alone by choice. A preference for being alone should not be treated as evidence that a person lacks emotional depth or fulfillment. They often have an active inner life, with many thoughts, ideas, and complex emotions. Time alone can help a person rest, reflect on recent experiences, and return to a steady state in ways that social settings often do not. People who choose to spend time alone often have a strong sense of self-awareness. These people spend substantial time monitoring their own thoughts, feelings, and responses. As a result, they tend to have a clearer sense of who they are than people who are regularly pulled away by social chatter. They do not rely on constant approval from others, since their sense of self is shaped mainly by their own internal standards and values. Another relevant psychological trait is introversion, which is often misread or defined too narrowly. It is not accurate to say that introverts are afraid of people. In research on personality, introversion is usually described as a preference for lower levels of social stimulation and more time alone to recover energy. Many introverts enjoy social contact, but they may choose smaller groups, quieter settings, or shorter interactions rather than frequent or high-energy social events. They tend to process sensory input in a different way. In group settings with loud talk, people speaking over one another, and non-stop interaction, they can become mentally exhausted. In contrast, spending time alone helps them regain energy. After a period of solitude, people often rejoin others feeling calmer, mentally clearer, and better able to concentrate. Individuals who are comfortable spending time alone often choose their relationships more selectively. In this context, they prefer depth rather than sheer volume. Rather than maintaining many superficial relationships, they prefer to invest in a small number of meaningful relationships. This level of selectiveness is not a sign of arrogance, it reflects emotional intelligence. They recognize that not every interaction is worth their time or energy. Research in psychology suggests that a preference for solitude is often linked with higher creativity. When we are not constantly taking in outside information, we tend to think more carefully and examine ideas in more depth. Across history, many writers, artists, philosophers, and innovators have depended on time alone to produce some of their strongest work. Silence gives the mind space to link ideas in ways that constant noise does not. A related point is the value of emotional independence. People who are comfortable spending time alone tend to manage their emotions on their own rather than relying on other people to steady how they feel. They are able to tolerate discomfort, boredom, or sadness without turning to distractions right away. This ability helps students stay steady under pressure and recover after setbacks. It shows students how to work through emotions rather than avoid them. In academic settings, it is often noted that people who prefer solitude tend to set clear personal boundaries. They tend to react strongly to settings that leave them mentally tired, so over time they learn to set limits and protect their psychological well-being. They decline when it is required. They tend to step away from situations that seem inauthentic or emotionally overwhelming. Setting clear boundaries reflects psychological maturity rather than weakness. Solitude is often associated with deeper, more sustained thinking. When a person is alone, the brain often shifts into a more reflective state. This refers to a process in which people examine past experiences, question their beliefs, and consider what they want to do in the future. Although it may sometimes encourage too much analysis, it can also support sound judgment. People who prefer being alone often approach problems carefully, since they tend to think things through before taking action. Choosing solitude is not the same as rejecting other people. Many people who choose to spend time alone still care deeply about other people. They simply relate to others in a different way. Rather than relying on frequent conversation, some people express care through practical actions, steady loyalty, and showing up when it matters most. In many social settings, there is an expectation that people should be around others often, which can make time alone seem unusual or even viewed as a problem. Psychology reminds us that people do not all need the same things in the same way. Some people report feeling happiest when they are surrounded by other people in large groups. For other people, it comes from quiet moments, personal work, and a sense of calm within themselves. People who prefer spending time alone are often described in research as self-reliant, reflective, and steady in how they manage emotions. They are not avoiding life, they are taking part in it with more attention and reflection. Solitude should not be treated as a defect, especially in academic settings where time alone can support careful reading, reflection, and focused work. I treat it as a mental setting that supports clear thinking, creative work, and a better understanding of oneself. When you meet someone who prefers silence to constant talk, it is better not to assume that they feel lonely. They may know themselves well enough to select what genuinely supports their intellectual growth.